How do you stay alive in a place where nature has effectively erased the possibility of life itself?
A land so cold that metal shatters, breath crystallizes, and time, quite literally, stops.
In the year 1596, 17 Dutch sailors drifted into one of the most hostile environments on Earth. They did not arrive as survivors. They arrived as optimists, men convinced that the Arctic would open a shortcut to unimaginable wealth. Instead, it closed around them like a trap. This is not merely the story of a failed voyage. It is the first real human experiment in Arctic survival, performed without theory, without preparation, and without mercy.
At the end of the 16th century, Amsterdam was the engine of global trade. Spices, silk, and silver flowed through its ports, but merchants wanted more.
They wanted speed. A northern sea route to Asia, one that bypassed Spanish and Portuguese control. Willem Barentsz, a respected navigator and cartographer, believed the legends.
He believed that warm currents flowed beneath Arctic waters, keeping a hidden passage open to the Pacific.
Maps were incomplete, climates misunderstood, and confidence dangerously high. 2 ships sailed north, their holds packed for trade, their crews dreaming of fortune. None of them imagined they were sailing toward a white silence that had never released anyone before. By late summer, their optimism began to fracture. Ice fields thickened, winds shifted.
The sea narrowed into jagged corridors of drifting ice. Hour by hour, the ship's movement slowed until it stopped entirely.
Then came the sound sailors fear most. Not cannon fire, not a storm, but wood breaking under pressure. The ice lifted the ship like a toy and crushed it against itself. Immobilized, warped, and doomed, the vessel was forced into a frozen bay the crew would later name Ice Harbor. They were trapped. The ship, once their protection, was now a liability. The hull twisted. Living aboard became impossible. Winter was coming, and the Arctic night would soon erase the sun for months. Against every maritime instinct, the men made a decision that felt like betrayal. They abandoned their ship. With limited food, almost no fuel, and no experience building on frozen ground. They stepped onto land that offered nothing. No trees, no shelter, no mercy. They were preparing to survive 9 months of darkness with whatever they could salvage before the cold took everything. Then they found the driftwood.
Massive Siberian tree trunks, carried thousands of kilometers by rivers and currents, lay frozen along the shore.
To the sailors, it felt like divine intervention. But salvation came at a price. Each log had to be dragged across deep snow by exhausted men, already weakening from hunger. Sweat froze instantly. Hands went numb. Tools shattered. Every journey cost strength they could not replace. Slowly, painfully, they began constructing what would later be known as the saved house. The structure was simple, but brilliant. Thick log walls, a compact shape to resist the wind. Snow piled high for insulation. The gaps sealed with moss, cloth, rope, anything that could stop the air from moving. When the driftwood ran out, they did the unthinkable. They dismantled their own ship. Deck planks became walls. Beams became rafters. Cabins became firewood. With every board removed, their hope of sailing away in spring vanished. But without shelter, they would not survive the week.
At the center of the hut, they built a hearth, the heart of their existence. Smoke was channeled through an improvised chimney reinforced with metal scraps. Sails became insulation. Snow and ice sealed the roof into an airtight shell. They slept packed together along the walls, sharing body heat.
The house was not comfortable. It was not warm. But it was alive.
Inside that hut, they unknowingly created one of the earliest energy-efficient shelters in history, born entirely from necessity.
Yet the cold still ruled. Liquids froze solid. Barrels split apart.
Wine had to be hacked from ice with axes. Clothing froze into rigid armor overnight.
Even beside the fire, their backs iced over while their faces burned. Then the clock stopped. The oil inside thickened. Springs snapped. Time itself froze. From that moment on, they relied on an hourglass and discipline alone to keep order. Without routine, madness waited.
The most dangerous moment came not from the cold, but from warmth. One night, seeking comfort, they burned coal and sealed the hut completely.
The heat felt wonderful. Too wonderful. Dizziness followed.
Weakness, collapse, carbon monoxide, an invisible executioner. One man, barely conscious, dragged himself outside and tore the door open. Arctic air flooded the hut, brutal, freezing, and life-saving. Minutes later, they would all have been dead.
From that night on, they chose cold over suffocation. As darkness deepened, they fought another enemy, despair.
To survive mentally, they kept rituals alive. Holidays were observed. Stories read aloud.
Games played in the snow beneath the northern lights. Movement, laughter, structure, these were weapons against insanity. And then came the bears. Polar bears battered the doors, climbed the roof, and stalked them during firewood runs.
Muskets failed in the cold. Spears and halberds became their defense. Every encounter was close, violent, terrifying. But a killed bear meant food, fat for lamps,
Light in endless night. They learned quickly what not to eat, and what might kill them faster than hunger. By January, the sun returned. But hope did not. The ship was beyond repair. Escape would come only by 2 small open boats, never meant for ocean travel. They rebuilt them with scavenged wood and sailcloth, turning harbor craft into lifeboats.
By spring, Barentsz was dying. Scurvy consumed him. He could not walk, but his mind remained sharp.
Even on the edge of death, he corrected maps and calculated courses. Before leaving, they sealed a letter inside the hut's chimney, testimony for anyone who might someday find it.
On June 14, 1597, they pushed off, 17 men against the Arctic Ocean.
The journey south was worse than the winter. Constant exposure, hunger, salt water eating their skin, sleep stolen in minutes. One by one, strength faded.
Barentsz died at sea, map in hand, still navigating. Weeks later, survivors reached civilization.
When they entered Amsterdam months later, people barely recognized them as human. They brought no wealth.
No spices, only a story. That story spread across Europe.
It became the foundation of Arctic survival knowledge.
And centuries later, the hut still stood, preserved by the cold like a time capsule.
The Arctic had not defeated them, but it had demanded everything.